Top 5 Pac-12 talking points I have trouble buying. And I didn't want to, this is what I kind of been sitting on for a little bit because I wanted to get to the point where, we kind of heard something out of the Pac-12. Hearing from Rick George the other day, and then, Barry Trammell, elaborated with somebody today on its, why he thinks, that is. And I really, like we said last week, we have a lot of respect for what Barry Trammell does as a journalist. You have more and more of Dennis Dodd, and all these things are happening. And so you keep hearing these talking points, and there's a lot that I just don't buy and wanted to go through it. Number one, the Coach Prime enhances number five. Sorry, Coach Prime enhances the media deal. Maybe in the short term, but are you, if you're anybody who's bidding on this, going to bet that any coach anywhere that's not named Nick Saban or Kirby Smart is going to be at the same place in 5 years? No. And they know that. So Joe Kliavkoff says that, but that's only something they're selling. Right? Like, hey, Deion Sanders is going to be on our television screens for at least a year. What if Colorado is so good over the next 2 years that somebody else comes hiring for Deion? He's not known to stay anywhere a long time. Look at his entire life. So
yeah, he was the ultimate free agent there with San Francisco Cowboys eventually. Yeah,
and look, if you're a Colorado fan, I'm not saying that Deion is going to eventually leave you in the lurch, but that's how coaching works now. And Deion is a lot about Deion, and so the fact that he would be a negotiating factor in a media deal where
that's going to go 5, 7, 9 years,
that he may not see the middle of for crying out loud.
Yeah, he was given a lot of heavy weight though in the recent piece. I'm talking about how his decision could weigh in on what they do, which is mind-boggling. But, I mean, you would need your coach's point of view. Certainly, you'd ask your football coach. Just a matter of this isn't like, hey, we're going to do this for a couple years and then circle back. I mean, this is a pretty long-term decision, at least for the next, few foreseeable years. So, I mean, it's interesting that they're getting his opinion. I mean, they do need it, but to the extent of which, he's going to swing things wildly one way or the other, no, I don't buy that, never did. And, quite frankly, if he doesn't win games, then he's not pushing the needle that much after a while anyways. I mean, he'll be great if he wins games, but if not, then I don't know really what that does for the media deal now or in the future. And his debut season upcoming, they're still under the same old media deal, so it has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on that. I understand, though, if you're the Pac and you're trying to say, like, well, here's a bright spot and here's something to glom onto and promote. I mean, he is, a person, now a leader of a program to, point towards because he's gotten people talking. No doubt about that. He's brought attention to Boulder that hadn't been there in a really long time, if ever. So he absolutely makes an impact instantly in that way. But, yeah, as far as, like, enhancing the media deal, no. There's way too many other, variables and just length and all that yeah, he'd have to be winning for a couple years, and then the deal comes up, and then, Colorado's already getting big ratings, and then maybe they have more of that kind of a push. But, no, not on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Number 4, that they're in a good spot. I've heard this from a couple different entities, like, oh, we're in a good spot. We're just trying to figure it out. No, if you were in a good spot, we wouldn't be talking about this in June. They're not in a good spot, and that's why we're able to even talk about this. And even if they get this done, I just feel like this is not a good spot to be in where you're, going down to the wire, 13 total months left in the deal at all, when everyone else is able to get theirs done really quickly. 3 of the other 4 people who would do this, and one of them has theirs done until 2036. So you're not in a good spot. And again, I know that you can't just come out and say like, oh no, everything's bad, because that's going to make it worse. But I'd rather them avoid this one than say anything at all.
Avoid what one?
Like saying they're in a good spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're probably trying to be as positive as they can. Like, if we were in that situation, I wouldn't be like, the ship is sinking. Yeah. Oh, my God. Like, I mean, what else are they supposed to do? I mean, I at least understand that part of it. Yeah. But, no, I don't buy for 1 second that they're in a quote-unquote good spot. I will say, however, is the Big Ten TV deal done? Like, really done?
Yep.
No. Is the Big 12 TV deal done? Like, really done?
Mack Rhoades said that there's still some things and details to iron out.
Yeah, so, no, I agree with you. I don't think that they're in a good spot. I think that some people probably wish they could change their language or the way that they said what they said at a couple of different points along this little journey of ours, because it did suddenly go, oh, well, wait a second, and all of a sudden puts expectations out there that obviously, as that a lot of those comments have come and gone weeks ago now, they didn't come to fruition so far at all. But I think you're just trying to do the best with what hand you're dealt, trying to save face and, put on a brave one for the folks that are listening to your words. But yeah, I don't think that I don't know that I would describe it as like a terrible spot, because we don't know what's being talked about, but they're in a good spot. Yeah, I don't necessarily buy that. No.
Well, we know this is that there could be just something where they're not saying much because they feel like they're close to a deal, or not saying much because they don't really have anything to say, right?
Yeah.
But we have been this way from almost the beginning. There's just a sense that somehow they pull it out. And what I mean by that doesn't mean desperation, but somehow they figure it out. I don't know how it's going to happen. Don't know how the metrics are going to work. But I don't know if they're in a good spot. No, not until they sign a deal, and the deal's in the $30 million or more category.
Yeah. Number 3, that this delay is not a big deal. I mean, it maybe is not a big deal as people are making it, but this is one that I do think that would be troubling, in that the longer it goes, you don't have one. And you heard Tim Fitzgerald say this before, in that, why is there something you just you haven't been able to agree to, and it makes people more and more uncomfortable, which could make them make a rash and maybe bad decision. It might be a bad decision for the teams to leave.
No,
ultimately.
I don't know.
But
they're not going to make a bad decision. If someone was to decide in the next 2 or 3 days they're leaving for the Big 12, how could that be a bad decision?
Well, I mean, I'm talking about
Pac-12 is going to get $50 million a year.
You don't need these, 10 years down the line, it could be bad for everybody. I'm just saying, it could be ultimately the decision that led to, the butterfly flapping its wings and a disaster.
Sure.
So, these things aren't good decisions a year in. Look, A&M looked like geniuses a year in, and they still are making a lot of money because they were a Heisman Trophy winner. It looked like they were on an ascendancy, and they're still the same team that they were when they came to the Pac-12 or in the SEC. They just have more money than they did in the Big 12. And so this could all be something that doesn't wind up working out for you in the long term, other than financially, but it is a big deal, because I think when you start pushing people to a limit where they have to start having a plan B, where they didn't really want a plan B or consider a plan B, because why need one? The Pac-12 is fine. Well, it's not fine if you've got teams going, well, we've got to make sure we have a plan B.
All right. Jason Shear, by the way, this whole thing is simple. Every Pac-12 school wants to stay. The belief is there won't be a good enough deal that will force some hands. If a good deal comes, then conference stays together. That really has been the
saying
main
that for
thing.
months.
Yeah.
That's been the message the entire time. It hasn't wavered whatsoever. I don't know about everybody else's messaging, but that's what we have said the entire length of this entire process, and have reiterated it at various points in time to make clear what the stance was. Is yes, the goal is to stay together, but it's all dependent on whatever they receive in return. I mean, that's the story in a nutshell. That's all it is. All the other stuff is just noise, but it's noise that is noteworthy, and especially, the longer it goes on. I think that I'm being very fair and open-minded from the Pac-12 perspective, because I don't think the delay was that big of a deal initially. I don't know how much of a big deal it is now. I think it started to become one, though, because regardless of if you need to sign something by next month or by next January 1st or whatever the timetable you feel like you're on is, the fact is that the longer it goes, the more Rick George suddenly goes, yeah, we'd like to be here, but we got to do what's best for us.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't saying that a month ago necessarily. We had, Kirk Schultz out there a month ago talking about, no, we want to work out, but,
we need to see the deal.
We need to see the deal. We need to see the deal. All of it depends on seeing the deal. And so just like our stance on this entire thing has not changed, the fact remains, let's see the deal, and that will determine every answer that comes from this entire thing. But the longer it's gone on, it has opened you up to where a few weeks ago, everybody had circled the wagons, and the Pac-12 folks were coming out one by one. No, we're good. We love it here. We just need to see the deal. And now you're like, yeah, but we're open-minded. We're reaching that stage of it now to where it's just publicly like, we're listening if we have to do that. We are. So it's become a thing whether it was to begin with or not.
Bob Thompson, who I trust with a lot, made a comment, it's been several weeks ago, that said, listen, just because they're closing in on a year away from the deal, a lot of people are focusing on, man, you got to have one before the year is up. And he keeps saying, no, you don't. And that's the one thing that keeps me from thinking that the dam will break, and who knows, maybe it just pops in the next day or two. All right?
Yep. Number 2, streaming is where you need to be in 2024. I think it's probably where you need to be in 2035. Really, in the next decade, everything's going to change. I think we're going to see, I mean, we're seeing it right now. There's going to be a gigantic shift in how all of this is delivered and distributed and who owns what and where and the way that companies are going to merge and things are going to be grabbed. So they might be ahead of the curve too far, which we've talked about a lot. But I think when you see how the writers are on strike right now, the actors are about to go on strike, the directors are all going to go on strike. That's a bunch of people who make a bunch of money and a bunch of content for all these companies that don't just do sports that they're going to have to pay. There are rights.
But wouldn't that open up needs to broadcast games to fill the time?
Yeah, but it's still money. I mean, money and people, everybody wants to be made whole at the same time. And, as much as it seems like these companies have a big, gigantic vat of money that they can just keep going into, eventually, the CEO has to make his money. And so the shareholders have to make their money.
It's like all ESPN people who are getting cut, laid off, furlough, whatever the words are, early retirement. Yet they're going to pay 5 or 6 guys $8 to 10, 12 million a year.
So all those things have to get worked out.
Yeah, they cut all those people, and Pat McAfee's just making minimum wage.
Yeah.
So
and his whole crew of folks,
and he'll take care of those guys because he's making so much money. He takes care of his staff. All right.
No, I've been asking the question the entire time, like especially when the PAC was getting dunked on, sort of early on about the streaming part of it. It's like, who's to say that they're not on the cutting edge of things? Mm-hmm. And I'll pose this question. This isn't very Big 12 friendly, but I don't care. I'm not trying to play team here. If you add more schools, what are the likelihood that those schools end up on streaming?
I mean, pretty likely.
Like 99%, because where else are they going to go? You've only got the same spots you've got. So if you add more teams and you still got the same amount of spots, but you've now got 2 more teams to fill another extra game each week. So where's that going? That bad boy's going on ESPN Plus.
Well, or you're going to take those teams. So say say Colorado and TCU is the best game that week in the conference, right? Well, that means that the game that you thought Iowa State and Kansas will get, somebody's getting pushed to streaming, and it's not just necessarily going to be the new teams.
But the thing is that that's all very true, but the problem is that you don't have any idea of what this looks like. So the question is what games on Prime, what games on this, what games on that, and then what does that leave over? And that's where I think your big question marks are, and why it leads the streaming part to be a little bit more of an uncertainty than just you're going to have your occasional games on there.
Roll Tide, Horn Frog. I think the streaming market for sports isn't quite there yet. You're right.
Agreed on that. In the short term. We agree with that. It's coming slowly but surely, but it's not to where it's we're all just diving into streaming on a regular basis to watch all of our college football. Yeah.
No, it's just it's one of they're ahead of the curve on the concept on their networks. They just couldn't execute it. Yeah. I mean, that's part of the problem with the Pac-12. You have a great idea, it's just it doesn't exist yet. And number 1. That they aren't worried that this will happen again in 5 years. I know that this is not something.
Are they saying that?
No, I was saying this, but this is a lot of this is. I just wanted to throw this out there. This is not necessarily.
Well, so this isn't their talking points. This is yours.
Well, this one in particular, but I needed to get 5. But I wanted to get into this. All of this, or that they. I think this is probably this case for everybody, though, that you have to constantly be worried that this is going to happen again and again and again right now.
No, there'll be realignment next year. There'll be realignment with a conference that you think won't have it 3 years from now. I agree.
Well, I just brought up earlier, I was asking y'all the question right off the radar about what y'all think this is all headed towards. And so if it's headed towards where you think it is, then, there will be much more to come. But I think you look no further than the Big 12, thinking about Gonzaga and UConn and any other number of reported teams, and thinking about basketball finances and thinking about all these things. Why are they doing that? Because they know that there's more change coming, and they're trying to stave it off as best as they possibly can, because they know they're not going to catch up to a couple of other conferences money-wise. They're trying to close that gap as best they can, but they know that it's not over, the change that's occurring. And those are positions not for right now. Those are positions as much as anything for the next several years, and trying to secure this thing, just like trying to get Pac-12 schools to get your West Coast time zone and all of that. So, I don't know that I've really seen anybody say they're not worried about what happens. I think everybody is just so focused on getting this done for the Pac-12, and then we'll worry about that later. You can only do one thing at a time, right? You can't worry about 5 years from now if you don't even know where you're living 2 years from now. So I think that's the focus, and you worry about this other part, this number one here, once you get everything all set up for the foreseeable future.
All right, Paul, thank you very much. Graham, Jack,